Jordan Foster glanced at the email notification on his phone, his brows furrowing. The subject line read, "Couple Spa Day Confirmation." He swiped it open, expecting it to be some promotional junk, but the details made him pause. The reservation was under his wife, Elena's, name, and it was set for this Saturday at Azure Tranquility Spa. He reread the email, trying to make sense of it. The reservation wasn't for one, but for two guests. "Since when does Elena book spa days?" he muttered. She wasn't one for indulgence, always preferring yoga or a quick manicure over full-day pampering. And more puzzling, why hadn't she mentioned it? As he read further, his confusion deepened. The confirmation included a detailed itinerary, couples massages, aromatherapy baths, and a private dinner to cap off the day. Couple spa day? Jordan's stomach twisted. It didn't feel like the kind of surprise his wife would plan for him. When Elena came home that evening, Jordan decided to test the waters. She breezed through the door, balancing her gym bag and a carton of takeout. Her bright smile faltered slightly when she saw Jordan sitting at the kitchen table, the email open on his laptop. "You're home early," she said, setting the bag down. "Yeah," Jordan said, his tone casual. "Had some downtime and figured I'd relax. Thought maybe we could catch up tonight." Elena smiled, though there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Nervousness, maybe. "Sounds nice. Let me grab a shower first." As she disappeared into the bathroom, Jordan stared at the screen again. His gut told him something was off, but he couldn't quite place it. Elena emerged 20 minutes later, her damp hair wrapped in a towel. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, avoiding his gaze. "So," Jordan began, keeping his tone light, "I got an interesting email today." Elena froze, her glass halfway to her lips. "Oh, yeah." He turned the laptop toward her. "Couple spa day? Sounds fancy." Elena's face paled, and her grip on the glass tightened. "Oh, that. It's a mistake." "A mistake?" Jordan echoed, raising an eyebrow. "How so?" I meant to book it for a friend of mine and her husband." Elena stammered. "She doesn't have time to do it herself, so I offered to help. Must have accidentally used my email." Jordan studied her, his chest tightening. Elena had always been a terrible liar. Her voice got higher, her sentences rushed. And right now, she was ticking every box. "Interesting," he said slowly, "because the confirmation says it's for Elena Foster and a guest. You didn't use their names?" Elena's eyes widened slightly before she quickly masked her expression. "I must have forgotten to update the details. It's been a hectic week at work, you know." Jordan nodded, but he wasn't convinced. "Who's the friend?" he asked. Elena hesitated, her fingers tapping against the counter. "You don't know her," she said quickly. "She's a new client at the studio." "A new client?" Jordan repeated, his tone skeptical. "Yeah," Elena said, forcing a smile. "She's been stressed, and I thought this might help her out. But I'll cancel it if it's going to cause confusion." Jordan didn't push further. Instead, he watched her carefully over dinner, noting the way she avoided eye contact and changed the subject every time the conversation drifted toward personal topics. Later that night, after Elena had gone to bed, Jordan reopened the email. Something about her explanation didn't sit right with him. If it was truly a mistake, why hadn't she fixed it immediately? With a sinking feeling, he decided to log into the spa's online portal using the reservation number. As he scrolled through the details, his heart sank. The reservation included a special note. "Excited to spend the day with you. Can't wait to unwind together. Love, Elena." Jordan stared at the screen, his stomach churning. The note wasn't meant for him. It was intimate, affectionate, something Elena hadn't been in months. He scrolled further, hoping to find a clue about the mysterious guest. But the reservation didn't list a name, only indicating that it was for 2 adults. The following day, Jordan decided to dig deeper. While Elena was at work, he searched her computer, looking for any connection to the spa. Sure enough, he found an email thread buried in her personal inbox. The recipient's name was listed as Michael S. Elena, the spa's booked for Saturday. Everything's confirmed. Can't wait to see you there. Smiley face. Michael, looking forward to it. We deserve a break. Jordan's hands trembled as he read the messages. He didn't recognize the name, but the tone left no doubt. Jordan couldn't take his eyes off the email thread. The casual intimacy between Elena and this Michael S. was glaring, impossible to deny. The man she claimed to be helping out wasn't a client or a friend. It was someone she had been hiding from him. For a moment, he simply sat there, his chest tightening with a mix of rage and heartbreak. The messages painted a picture he hadn't been prepared for. Elena wasn't just keeping secrets. She was actively building a relationship behind his back. That evening, when Elena came home, Jordan felt like he was staring at a stranger. She greeted him with a smile, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the forced brightness in her tone. "How was your day?" she asked, setting her bag down by the door. "Busy," Jordan replied, keeping his voice even. "Yours?" "Pretty standard," Elena said, avoiding his gaze as she rummaged through the fridge. "Back-to-back classes at the studio, but nothing too crazy." Jordan nodded, his jaw tightening. "You must be looking forward to the weekend, then. A spa day sounds like a nice way to unwind." Elena froze for just a moment before straightening and closing the fridge. "Yeah, I was actually thinking about canceling it. You know, since it's causing confusion." "Really?" Jordan asked, leaning back in his chair. "Because it seems like you've been planning this for a while." Elena's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" Jordan stood and walked over to her, pulling his phone from his pocket. He opened the email thread with Michael and held it up for her to see. "This is what I mean, Elena," he said, his voice low and cold. "Care to explain?" Elena's face turned pale as she stared at the screen. For a moment, she didn't say anything, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "Jordan, don't lie to me." Jordan interrupted, his voice sharp. "You've been sneaking around with this guy, haven't you? How long has this been going on?" Elena's eyes filled with tears as she looked down, unable to meet his gaze. "It's not what you think," she said weakly. "Then what is it?" Jordan demanded, his anger boiling over. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been cheating on me. So tell me, Elena, how long?" 3 months, Elena admitted, her voice trembling. Jordan's stomach churned, the weight of her confession hitting him like a punch to the gut. 3 months, he repeated bitterly. "And all this time, you've been lying to my face, pretending like everything's fine." "It wasn't supposed to happen," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't plan this, Jordan. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," Jordan said, his voice breaking. "You didn't just hurt me, Elena. You destroyed everything we built together." Elena sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I know," she whispered. "I know I messed up, but I was feeling lost, disconnected. You've been so busy with work, and I felt like I was fading into the background." "And you thought the solution was to find someone else?" Jordan snapped, his anger rising. "You didn't think to come to me? To talk to me? I didn't know how." Elena said, her voice breaking. "I was scared, Jordan. Scared that you'd just brush me off, that you wouldn't understand." Jordan laughed bitterly, shaking his head. You were scared? You've been sneaking around behind my back for months, Elena. What do you think I'm feeling right now? Elena fell silent, her sobs the only sound in the room. Jordan turned away, running a hand through his hair as he tried to process everything. Who is he? Jordan asked finally, his voice trembling. Michael. He's a friend from one of my yoga classes. Elena admitted. We started talking, and it spiraled. Jordan clenched his fists, his chest tightening. Does he know you're married? Elena nodded, her face crumpling. Yes, he knows. Jordan's laugh was bitter and hollow. Of course he does, he muttered. And yet, that didn't stop either of you. For a long moment, the room was silent, the weight of their shared pain pressing down on them. Jordan stared at the woman he had loved for years, the woman who had betrayed him so deeply. I need space, he said finally, his voice cold. Pack a bag and go. I don't want to see you right now. Elena looked up at him, her expression panicked. Jordan, please leave, Jordan said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Elena nodded reluctantly, her tears falling faster as she retreated to the bedroom. Jordan listened to the sounds of her packing, his heart heavy with a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. When she finally left, the house felt eerily quiet. Jordan sat on the couch, his head in his hands, as the weight of her betrayal settled over him. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: things would never be the same again. The days following Elena's departure were some of the longest of Jordan's life. The house, once filled with their laughter and shared routines, now felt like an echo chamber of everything they had lost. Every corner held a memory, but those memories were tainted now, corrupted by the knowledge of her betrayal. Jordan threw himself into his work, staying late at the office and volunteering for extra projects. But no amount of spreadsheets or conference calls could distract him from the gnawing question that haunted him. Why hadn't he seen this coming? One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, Jordan turned to the only person he trusted with the truth, his older sister, Monica. They met at a small cafe downtown, their usual spot for heart-to-hearts over coffee and pastries. Monica arrived first, her sharp eyes immediately assessing Jordan's disheveled appearance. You look like you haven't slept in days, she said, pushing a latte toward him as he sat down. I haven't, Jordan admitted, running a hand through his hair. Monica waited patiently, sensing that he needed time to gather his thoughts. Finally, Jordan took a deep breath and told her everything about the spa reservation, the emails, and the confrontation with Elena. By the time he finished, Monica's expression was a mix of disbelief and anger. She cheated on you in your own home? Monica said, her voice low but fierce. That's a whole new level of disrespect. Jordan nodded, his chest tightening. I keep asking myself if I missed the signs. If there was something I could have done differently. Monica reached across the table, placing a hand on his. Don't you dare blame yourself for this, she said firmly. This is on her, Jordan. She made the choice to lie to you, to betray your trust. None of that is your fault. But what if she was right? Jordan said quietly. What if I did neglect her? I've been so focused on work lately, trying to save up for the house renovation, and maybe I stopped. Monica interrupted. You're making excuses for her, and she doesn't deserve them. Marriage is about communication. If she was feeling disconnected, it was her responsibility to tell you, not to run off with some random guy. Monica's words stayed with Jordan as he drove home that night. She was right. He had spent so much time analyzing his own actions, trying to find a reason for Elena's betrayal, that he hadn't allowed himself to fully confront what she had done. Back at the house, Jordan sat in the living room, staring at the space where Elena's yoga mat used to be. The thought of her meeting Michael in those classes, building their connection under the guise of self-improvement, made his stomach turn. Determined to understand the full extent of her betrayal, Jordan decided to dig deeper. The next morning, he scrolled through Elena's social media accounts, looking for any clues he might have missed. While her posts were mostly innocuous, pictures of sunsets, yoga poses, and inspirational quotes, he noticed a few comments from Michael scattered throughout. Michael S. Looking amazing as always, smiley face. Elena. Thanks, you're too kind. Can't wait for class tomorrow. Jordan clenched his jaw as he read the exchange. Their familiarity was sickening, but it also provided him with a lead. Later that day, Jordan drove to the yoga studio where Elena taught classes. He parked across the street, watching as students trickled in and out. It was a place he had visited a handful of times to pick her up after work, but now it felt like enemy territory. After an hour of waiting, Jordan spotted him. Michael. The man was tall and athletic, his easy confidence apparent as he chatted with another student. Jordan's chest tightened as he watched Michael laugh, his demeanor casual and carefree, as though he hadn't been a part of tearing apart someone's marriage. Jordan debated confronting him right then and there, but he decided against it. This wasn't about Michael. It was about Elena and the choices she had made. If he was going to confront anyone again, it had to be her. That evening, Elena called. Jordan, she began, her voice hesitant. I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need to see you. Please, just give me a chance to explain everything. You had your chance, Jordan said coldly. I mean everything, Elena said quickly. Not just what I did, but why I did it. I owe you that much. Jordan hesitated, his grip tightening on the phone. He didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear any more excuses. But part of him, the part that still needed closure, agreed to meet. Tomorrow, he said, at the park near the house. Be there at 6. I'll be there, Elena promised. That night, Jordan lay awake, his mind racing with thoughts of what she might say. He knew he needed to hear the truth, no matter how painful it was. Only then could he decide what came next. The next evening, Jordan arrived at the park 10 minutes early. The air was cool, and the distant sound of children playing on the swings mingled with the rustle of leaves in the breeze. He chose a bench under a sprawling oak tree, far from the main path, and waited. Elena showed up right on time, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and her face was bare of makeup, a rarity for her. Jordan noted the bags under her eyes, and the nervous way she wrung her hands as she approached. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly, sitting down at the far end of the bench. Jordan didn't respond immediately. He kept his gaze fixed ahead, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. You said you wanted to explain everything, he said finally. So explain. Elena took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clasped them in her lap. First, I want to say I'm sorry, Jordan, she began. I know I've hurt you, and there's nothing I can say to make it right. But I need you to understand why it happened. Jordan turned to look at her, his expression cold. Why you cheated on me? She flinched but nodded. It wasn't about you, she said quickly. It was about me. I felt invisible, like I was just going through the motions every day. Work, yoga, home, it all started to blur together, and I felt like I was losing myself. And instead of talking to me, you decided to find yourself with Michael, Jordan said, his voice laced with bitterness. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I know I should have come to you, she said. What would you do if you found out your partner was cheating with someone you knew? Write in the comments. But I was scared, Jordan. You've been so busy with work, and every time I tried to bring up how I was feeling, it seemed like you weren't really listening. So it's my fault? Jordan asked, his tone sharp. No, Elena said quickly, shaking her head. I'm not saying that. This was my mistake, and I take full responsibility for it. I just. I felt like I was drowning, and Michael was a lifeline. At first, it was just talking about yoga, about life. But then, it turned into more. Jordan finished for her, his chest tightening. How long, Elena? How long were you lying to me? 3 months, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jordan stared at her, the weight of her words settling over him. 3 months, he repeated. And you didn't think once about what this would do to me? To us? I did, Elena said, her tears spilling over. Every time I saw you, I felt sick with guilt. But by then, it felt like I couldn't stop. And then the spa day. Jordan let out a bitter laugh. You accidentally booked it under your name. That's how careful you were. Elena sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she said, her voice muffled. But I want to try to fix this, Jordan. I love you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. Jordan's jaw tightened as he looked away, his emotions warring inside him. He had spent the past few days imagining this conversation, hoping for some kind of clarity. But all he felt was anger and heartbreak. You say you love me, he said finally. But love isn't just words, Elena. It's actions. And your actions have shown me exactly how much I mean to you. That's not true, she said desperately. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. Jordan stood, shoving his hands into his pockets. I need time, he said, his voice cold. Time to figure out if I can even look at you without seeing him, without seeing all the lies. Elena stood too, reaching for his arm, but he pulled away. Jordan, please, she begged. Don't shut me out completely. Let me prove to you that I can be better, that we can be better. I don't know if there's anything left to prove, Jordan said, his voice trembling. He turned and walked away, leaving Elena standing alone in the fading light. Back at home, Jordan sat in the living room, staring at the blank TV screen. The conversation had left him feeling raw, as though the carefully constructed walls he had built around his pain had been torn down. But beneath the hurt, there was something else, a sliver of relief. For the first time since discovering the affair, he felt like he had some control over the situation. Now, the question was whether he wanted to use that control to rebuild or to let go. The days following Jordan's meeting with Elena were quiet but turbulent. He avoided her calls and messages, retreating into his thoughts as he grappled with what came next. Every time his phone buzzed, he felt a pang of anxiety, knowing it was likely her. Each voicemail she left was more desperate than the last. Jordan, please, just let me talk to you. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I love you. I'll do anything to fix this. He stopped listening after a while. Words were meaningless now. Actions, decisions, those were the things that mattered. Jordan spent his nights replaying their conversation in his head. Elena had seemed sincere, broken even, but he couldn't shake the image of her with Michael, the intimacy they had shared, the lies she had told to cover it up. He had always considered their marriage a partnership built on trust. Now that trust was shattered, and he wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. You need to figure out what you want, Monica had told him during one of their conversations. Not what she wants, not what you think people expect you to do. What will make you happy? But that was the problem. Jordan didn't know what happiness looked like anymore. 2 weeks after their meeting at the park, Jordan decided it was time to face his feelings head-on. He cleared his schedule for the day, packed a small bag, and drove to a secluded cabin he and Elena had rented for their anniversary a few years ago. The cabin was nestled deep in the woods, surrounded by towering pines and the soothing sound of a nearby creek. It was a place where they had once shared laughter and love, a place that now felt heavy with memories. Jordan spent the first few hours sitting on the porch, staring out at the forest. He thought about the life he and Elena had built, the late-night conversations, the shared dreams of starting a family, the way she used to make him laugh with her silly impressions. But he also thought about the cracks that had formed over time, the growing distance, the unspoken frustrations, the choices that had led them here. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jordan made his decision. The next morning, he drove back to the city and called Elena. Her voice was tentative when she answered, as if bracing herself for the worst. "Jordan," she said softly, "I've been waiting to hear from you. We need to talk," he said. "Come by the house tonight." When Elena arrived that evening, she looked exhausted. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she seemed smaller somehow, as though the weight of her actions had physically diminished her. They sat across from each other in the living room, the tension between them almost unbearable. "I've made my decision," Jordan said, his tone steady but firm. Elena held her breath, her hands gripping the edge of the couch. "I've thought about this a lot," Jordan continued, "about what we had, what we've lost, and whether it's something we can rebuild. And the truth is, I don't think I can move past this." Elena's face crumpled, and she let out a choked sob. "Jordan, please, let me finish," he said, his voice softening. "You broke my trust, Elena, and trust is the foundation of everything. Without it, I don't see how we can move forward." "I know I messed up," Elena cried, "but I love you. Isn't that worth fighting for?" Jordan looked at her, his heart breaking all over again. "Love isn't enough," he said quietly. "Not after what you've done. I deserve to be with someone who respects me enough to be honest, someone who doesn't make me question everything." Elena buried her face in her hands, her sobs filling the room. Jordan sat silently, letting her process his words. He had rehearsed this conversation in his mind countless times, but saying the words out loud felt both freeing and devastating. After a long moment, Elena wiped her eyes and looked up at him. "So this is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jordan nodded. "This is it." They spent the next hour discussing logistics, how to divide their belongings, how to handle the house, and when she would collect the rest of her things. It was clinical, almost mechanical, but it was the only way Jordan could keep himself from falling apart. When Elena left that night, Jordan felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. He knew the road ahead would be painful, but for the first time in weeks, he felt like he could breathe. Over the following months, Jordan focused on rebuilding his life. He joined a hiking group, reconnected with old friends, and even started therapy to work through his emotions. One afternoon, while cleaning out the house, he came across a photo album from their honeymoon. He flipped through the pages, smiling at the memories, but feeling no urge to cling to them. "Goodbye, Elena," he whispered, closing the album and tucking it away. By the end of the year, Jordan had sold the house and moved into a smaller apartment downtown. It was a fresh start, free from the shadows of the past. As he stood on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker below, Jordan felt a sense of peace. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he was ready to face it on his own terms.